Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, copy. Deja vu.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Deja Reviewed podcast, where we talk about the original versions of TV shows that were later rebooted. This is season 1, which we're calling In the Zone because we're discussing the Twilight Zone. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're talking about season 1, episode 6 of the Twilight Zone, entitled Escape Clause. This episode came out in 1959. It was directed by Mitchell Leeson, written by Rod Serling, starring Rod Serling, David Wayne, and Thomas Gomez.
There is a fifth dimension.
Both shadow and substance of things and
Suddenly up ahead,
just possible. You're moving into a land, another dimension.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Okay, so the opening voiceover from Rod Serling for this episode is, "You're about to meet a hypochondriac. Witness Mr. Walter Bedecker, age 44, afraid of the phone, death, disease, other people, germs, draft, and everything else. He has one interest in life, and that's Walter Bedecker. One preoccupation, the life and being of Walter Bedecker. One abiding concern about society, that if Walter Bedecker should die, how will it survive without him?"
And IMDb has their kind of little blurb about this episode as, "A hypochondriac man sells his soul to the devil, exchanging it for several thousand years of immortality."
And that's a pretty good summary. It starts with him in bed seeing a doctor, and the doctor tells him he has nothing wrong with him. The devil appears. They make this deal for his soul. And then the way the episode wraps up, for those who haven't seen it, is he quickly finds that life is pretty boring once nothing can hurt him and there's no thrills left. And so he decides he's going to try to have the thrill of the electric chair, and tries to get arrested for killing his wife and being sentenced and get sentenced to death, except it turns out he just gets sentenced to life in prison. So he's going to have to spend eternity in prison. And so he calls the devil back and says, go ahead and kill me, which is the escape clause from their contract.
So do you think let's get right into it, Mark. Do you think that he actually was trying to get himself, because toward the end of the episode, and his wife falls off of a building, and we'll get to that as we're going through this description. I don't think that he intentionally killed her, but he was basically, Walter Bedecker goes through this whole thing, a kind of Groundhog Day approach, as he's trying to kill himself, essentially, or is trying to, I shouldn't even say that.
He's not trying to kill himself. He's trying to feel some sort of thrill.
Right. And so one of his ideas, he goes up to the roof of his apartment building, and he's like, I'm going to jump off. And his wife, as she's trying to stop him, falls off the building and dies. So he sees that as his, I don't think this was planned. He sees that as his sort of out to see if he can get like you said, get the chair and see if that will give him a thrill. And then of course he, calls the police, turns himself in, and gets that life in prison instead. So I didn't think that he intentionally was trying to kill his wife for
no.
reason.
I mean, she basically accidentally and very awkwardly sort of just like standing there and like throws herself accidentally over the railing.
Jumps over the ledge off the roof.
You could see like how they were trying to stage it is supposed to be. She's like backing up like away from him and like accidentally slips, but it basically looks like she just sort of jumps backwards off the ledge.
Yes.
So that was accidental, but then he sort of, I guess, saw it as an opportunity. There was a little bit, I thought, of suspense there when he goes in, because, the first thing I thought was like, oh, they're going to think he killed his wife and send him to prison forever, and that's going to be like the irony. And then he goes in and calls the police. He's like, oh, let's try to see how the electric chair feels. I'm like, well, that's pretty gutsy. Like, then his lawyer's like super excited that he got him off the death penalty, and he's like, no, I wanted the death penalty.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about his lawyer when we get to the modern applicability of this.
I think the lawyer might have some things to say about that.
Yes, I had a couple, just one thing specifically to say. So
do you want to go back and kind of start at the start, or
what's that?
You want to go back and start at the start of the episode?
Yeah. So I think right off the bat, I would say that Walter Bedecker. Now, bear in mind that to this point in our viewing of these Twilight Zone episodes, we've met literally death. Literally, the devil was in this episode. In Mr. Denton on Doomsday, Martin Landau played this just bully piece of shit cowboy character that was just mocking this town drunk. We've met some.
Well, we also met Fate in that one, who was a nice guy, but
Fate seemed. Yeah. But we've met some bad people. And Walter Bedecker is the biggest piece of shit person that I think we've met to this point. He is right off the bat. He's lying in his bed, and we're seeing another doctor making a house call. Yeah. He's lying in his bed after the doctor leaves the room. He says that he's a quack because the doctor's like, "There's nothing wrong with you," and then he tells his wife, and this is maybe a topical political thing. He goes, I could smell the collusion between the two of you the moment the doctor and you, meaning his wife Ethel, entered the room. And I'm like, you are just a disgusting person.
No, this guy is horrible.
Yes. He doesn't give a shit about anyone but himself.
Yeah, it was interesting. My very first notes on this episode, as I was like watching through it, my first note is actually something else we can come back to, but then my second and third notes, one was this guy's not a likable character at all, which is different than like the other ones we've seen. The protagonist, even though they have problems, always seem generally likable, and you kind of want them to do well or things to turn out okay for them, or at best or I should say at worst, they're like a cipher. Like in the first episode, Where Is Everybody?
Yes.
We don't really know much about the guy, but he doesn't seem bad. And we're kind of with him like, yeah, where is everybody? Let's figure out what's going on. And this guy, I was like, can he just keel over and die? Yes. My very next note, when we figured out that the woman was his wife, because in the first part of the scene when she first comes in, it's not clear if she's like his sister or housekeeper or what.
I had the same note.
Then they find out the wife, and I just wrote, how is he married? Like, who
I
would
totally agree.
When she falls off the ledge later, there's not even a moment of like feeling bad for her or anything.
Nope.
His comment is, wait, I like wrote it down here somewhere.
I'll fill in while you're doing. He literally just he immediately lights up a cigarette and has zero reaction
to his wife dying, who's been taking care of him through all his hypochondria. Yep. His line is, I wonder what it felt like.
Yes, that's right.
And the line, I just got to throw in his line right before that, where she says, when she's trying to talk him off the ledge, she's like, come back down, I'll make you some potato pancakes. He goes, Ethel, you are a potato pancake.
I wrote down the same thing. He calls her a potato pancake because she's tasteless. I was like, you piece of shit person.
If there is anyone we would be rooting for the devil to scheme out of his soul and like have to go to hell, it is this guy, which I think was intentional. Like, I think we are meant to not like feel super distraught or upset that things go badly for him. I think that's intentional on Serling's part, that we don't like him.
I hope so, because they did cast a very punchable faced actor to play. I mean, like, he is I could not place who he reminded me of, and I still can't place it. If you guys tweet at me who you think that reminds me of, but he has a very familiar face to me, and I cannot. And I looked up him on IMDb. There's nothing really that I would have seen, but he's awful. He is an awful person. So while we're actually on the topic of his wife, I
thought you were going to say, while we're on the topic of him being an awful person, because there's so much to talk about with that. But let's talk about the wife.
Yeah, we could spend the entire episode saying what a piece of shit he is.
You know, the saying they always have, like, the long-suffering wife. I'm like, this is like the person that term was made for.
Yes. So did I miss the part? Because I've watched this episode a couple times, and I wasn't specifically looking for this any time until I realized when I was taking notes. Did I miss a part where he told his wife that he's immortal? Because, like, and right before he calls her a potato pancake, he also blames her for not finding him something exciting to do, which I thought was just disgusting.
He does mention, so he doesn't get into the whole backstory. He's like very matter of fact. It's right after he drinks this concoction of ammonia and iodine and a bunch of other stuff. She's like, what is going on? He's like, you really want to know? I sold my soul to the devil and now I'm immortal. Like, he just kind of says it in one line and then like goes up to the rooftop to jump off.
Okay. So she didn't know. So his whole scheme. This reminded me of the Shyamalan the Unbreakable. When Bruce Willis realizes he's unbreakable, he's like, well, I guess I'll become a superhero and fight crime. This fucking asshole is like, I guess I'm invincible. I'm going to scam insurance companies. He throws himself underneath a subway train, which I'm sure traumatized all of these people that are standing around him.
Did you see the woman in the back, one of the extras, like this really giant, like, oh my goodness, faint, and like the guy she's with clearly planning to catch her like well before she faints. Like these extras were like given like, okay, you're gonna faint and you catch her, and he's like ready to catch her like before he even jumps off the platform.
No, I did not. I missed it. I'm sad that I'll have to maybe go back and watch that. But and then the insurance, I made a note of this too. One of the insurance adjusters that comes in for no good reason, he goes, all right, get out of here. I'll take your money, but you bore me. I'm like, fuck you, you asshole. Like, he's the worst
And the
character.
the insurance adjuster had been in the apartment for all of maybe 15 seconds. He walks in, the guy's like, you got my check? And he's like, yes, just sign here. And then he's like, get out, you bore me. I'm like, he hasn't done anything to bore you or not. I did love the touch of, so we see him sort of jump in front of the subway or under it, and then we see the him talking with the insurance person, and so we're like, oh, he's trying to collect insurance on that. As that insurance guy's walking out, he meets another insurance guy at the door who's coming in to pay him from jumping under a bus the previous day. I will say, I want to get the insurance companies he has that are, I mean, he jumped on the subway that day. He's still got the torn up suit on. And the guy's like, you'll have your check tomorrow. I'm like, not with the insurance companies I've ever dealt with.
How about the fact that he almost immediately is bored? Like he has his immortality, and he's almost immediately like, oh man, I have to cheat death I have to like, was he a skydiver before? Like
No,
he
was
just fucking
sitting
laid
in bed being a hypochondriac.
Right.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. That we'll talk about this later, I'm sure too. But to me, that was the biggest weakness of this episode. Is there's so many different ways you could go with once you're immortal, like what you would do. If you're unbreakable, what would you do? You know, Bruce Willis trying to be a superhero was like more interesting and sort of him testing the limits of that. And this guy has like the least interesting thing to do with it, kind of commit insurance fraud. And then like the least, like, okay, so were you normally going to like jump in front of subways and now you can't get a thrill out of it? Like, I don't, and I'm like, there's so much out there that you could do. And this guy has like no imagination for what he could do with it. Even the fact that when his wife dies, he leaps immediately to like, well, let's see what the chair feels like. Like, if you want to feel that, go grab some live wires. You don't need to like go through the whole legal system.
Right. And why didn't he just, when he's like, I wonder what that felt like when she fell, his whole point of going up to the roof was to jump. Why didn't he jump after
I really
her?
thought he was going to jump after her.
Yeah. It was weird. It was very, very weird.
I think we'll get to the ratings later, but this was one of my less enjoyed episodes of what we had. And I think so much of it is it was so much missed opportunities, and that's always a big thing for me. Even in sometimes good films, or films I enjoy, but it's like, man, that could have been so much more. And for me, just one that always sticks in my head is Old School, which I think is quite funny in the genre it's in. The Todd Phillips, where the Will Ferrell and Vince Vaughn and Luke Wilson like start a fraternity when they're in their 40s or whatever. And it's funny. It's an enjoyable movie. But like, man, the idea of like some 40-something guys like renting a house on a campus and trying to start their own fraternity is so ripe with potential. And that movie took like every easiest joke possible, did nothing interesting with it. And that was what I felt like with this, where I expect more out of Serling. Like, it's got a really interesting setup, a lot of potential to what you could do with it. And it didn't explore any of the interesting avenues.
No, I totally agree. Let's point out, because this has been a running theme from before we move on from that, because there was something you said reminded me of something. A few episodes back, I think, you and I talked about how if we had unlimited time. I think it was I don't know, we were talking about retirement or something, and we're like, oh, you had mentioned that you'd probably get bored. I was like, no way I'd get bored. But this
I
guy
definitely would
now-
not have gotten bored in week 1 like this
Right.
guy did.
Yeah, this guy has infinite time, and I know there wasn't that much media back then, but like you could have watched Gone with the Wind, you could have read all the books that you wanted to read. There was a lot that he could have done before he got immediately bored, because like you said, and especially Mark, like this is a really good point. The whole thing was set up with him being this hypochondriac. So you're going to tell me that all of a sudden he goes from hypochondriac to willing to throw himself under a New York, I assume, subway train? Like, if anything is going to kill you, it's going to be like licking the ground on a New York subway, even if you are immortal. So,
Well, and like he's in New York,
bizarre.
even in the 50s, there was plenty to do in New York. Like,
Yes, go see a play.
Yeah, we were talking about that. I think we were talking about with the retire early movement and like these people who want to retire
Yes.
at like age 40
Yes,
or 30.
that's it.
Yeah, I think about how much of my life there's like things you would love to do and don't have the time to. And
Right.
like the idea of having that time, and one of the interesting ways it could have gone is like, okay, he's immortal and can't die, but like, the devil arranges it so he's flat, broke, and destitute and can't, like living on the street, can't enjoy life's pleasures or things like that. And it's not even that. It's just like he immediately got bored. And, you mentioned Unbreakable. I'll bring it up one more time and then probably bring it up again later, I'm sure. That one of the key things with that is that Bruce Willis was already working like as a security guard. And Mr. Glass, Samuel L. Jackson, who's fantastic, makes a sort of comment about, do you think it's an accident that you sought out a profession where you're like helping people and protecting, and there's something innate in his character about it? If this guy would have been like an Evel Knievel type, and he's like
Right.
laid up in bed after his 85th accident, like, man, I love doing these crazy stunts. That's all that excites me, but my body can't do it anymore. And the devil's like, hey, I'll make you indestructible and immortal. And then he goes and does the stunts, but it's no longer thrilling. That would be more interesting because now you're putting a conflict with his character.
Now, I don't want to give up the goose too early on, but we're going to see an episode in a little while that explores kind of that idea a little bit more.
Okay.
Where if you take away the thrill of this and the danger of this, then what's the point? Mm-hmm. And since you're bringing up Unbreakable again, I'm going to bring up Groundhog Day again. Bill Murray, who it was basically this character with charm and tact and humor.
Right. Like also clearly a jerk at the start of the movie, although he
Right.
Gets redeemed by the end. But yeah, at least had some like humor, and he's bringing the Bill Murray persona to it. But even like the things when he's being mean to people, he's at least mean in like interesting, humorous ways.
Right.
Not that make you like him, but that make him interesting to watch. And this guy's just a dick.
Right. And Bill Murray, I don't think is mean to the point where he would have not shed a tear if he watched his wife fall to her death. But Bill Murray how long until he started wanting to kill? He had learned the piano, like he had done all these sorts of things until he started trying to kill himself. Like we're assuming that this is, and Bill Murray was not in New York with time advancing and with a relationship. He was stuck in Punxsutawney on a very particular day in a cold winter, like in a shitty town that he couldn't even get away from it because he kept waking up in Punxsutawney. So Bill Murray did not I could see getting depressed to the point where you're like, I've got to end this. Also,
Yeah, and
Bill Murray didn't ask for this. Like Bill Murray
Right.
got caught in this loop. Bedecker or whatever his name is, he asked for this. He wanted this.
Yeah, and the other thing with Murray is even this pretty despicable character at the start of that movie, his first thought, like the first couple cycles, he's like trying to figure it out, but then he's like, okay, what can I do? He's like, hey, I'll steal this money off an armored car. Like he's doing things that maybe aren't good, but like trying to take some advantage of it. And the reason he eventually starts trying to kill himself is because he kind of can't make any progress because he loops back to the same day. Like, Walter, if he keeps committing his stupid insurance fraud scheme, like he eventually could accumulate a lot of money. He could just
Right.
go and hold up a bank, like, and he could make forward progress in, trying to accumulate wealth or experiences or whatever, in a way that Bill Murray couldn't. And he sort of leaps to, although, the interesting thing is if things had gone the way he wanted and he ended up in the electric chair, what I started thinking about, when he was having one of the conversations with his lawyer, and he's like, he does have a good line where he's like, well, if they try to give me the chair, all they're going to get is a staggering electric bill.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, like, well, what do you think's going to happen? Like, they can't electrocute you, so they're like, okay, well, sir, you're free to go.
Yeah.
Like,
Lethal
he would have
injection.
ended up in jail somehow anyway. Like, Walter is not a deep thinker. He has not thought out many of his plans very well.
Yeah, and I was going to make that point too. That's a great point. Like, we don't have anything written into the law. What if these ways of trying to execute someone don't work? Like, but you're right. Like, they would have just, I'm sure, commuted the sentence to something else. Before we get off of Groundhog Day 2, I will also say, just to give you an idea of how despicable Walter was. Yes, Bill Murray does some questionable things, stealing the money, blah, blah, blah. But he also saves that kid from falling out of a tree. He does a lot of good. He tries to set up his day to do as much good as he can too. In addition to, hey, I'm going to grab this sack of money. And he's kind of just trying stuff, but learning piano. I mean, he does like a lot of like sweet, good things. And then, of course, the sweetest thing is trying to get Andy McDowell to fall in love with him because he's...
Well, and some of the things he does are at least self-improvement, too. Like, we never see Walter like, hey, I've never read these classic books. Let me read those. Let me become a doctor or something. You had infinite time. You could do all sorts of useful things.
You're right. And there wasn't even the self-awareness of Walter being like, hey, I don't feel like shit anymore. Like, there wasn't even a moment where he's like, because we see him laid up in bed. And I think the doctor even says it's something psychosomatic, that he's just creating these illnesses for him, and frankly, if it is psychosomatic, meaning it's just all in his head, why is he suddenly, I guess if just because the devil, what if he wasn't actually immortal? Because that train, well, I guess he did drink the ammonia, but the train kind of ran over him and scraped up his suit, but didn't really hit him. He was kind of underneath the train. What if it was all...
The doctor's line, because I wrote that down because I thought this was another, just Serling was such a great way with words, which is why we always read the voiceover at the beginning.
Right.
He says, there's nothing wrong with you except these ailments you manufacture for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head, quack. Yeah.
Yes. So what if that's all this was? What if the devil just told him that, hey, of course he did get hit by a bus, I suppose too, but, and the first thing he does is sticks his hands on the radiator.
But like he actually
tests
it with I'm like miming it here as if somebody could see what I'm doing. I don't understand how audio works. Yeah, he goes up to his hot water radiator and he like kind of sticks a finger on it first to see if, he's going to get burned, and that feels okay. So then he like puts his hand on, which I actually wrote down. I thought that was actually kind of smart. I feel like it's weird to say, a lot of things in this genre where someone finds out they're immortal, the first thing they do is like, what if I jump off a 200-foot building? I'm like, don't you want to build up to that? Like, let's test the immortality with something that would just injure you first before you like go all the way. So I kind of dug that.
Well, that reminds me of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Isn't kind of one of the first real tests of his abilities? He runs and jumps off a roof. Like, but it's been a while since I've seen it. He kind of like
tries to build up to that, like with his webs and stuff. But then that's kind of like the big moment. He's like, okay, I can't do this stuff. Let's go for it. But it felt like he had built to it a little bit. The other thing that, oh my gosh, it just left my head. Sorry.
I cut you off. I apologize. We can go back to a recurring Twilight Zone theme if you want to from the beginning of this episode.
Well, my very first note on the episode, remember I said my second and third ones were about what a dick he is. My very first one was another shot of people in mirrors. Man, those Twilight Zone directors just love everyone being shot in mirrors. And kind of the whole scene with the doctor and the devil, they just keep cutting to the shot of the mirror with them in the background instead of like showing them directly.
They must think it's super impressive that they can shoot a mirror without the cameraman showing up in the mirror.
They were very talented. Oh, I know what the thing was I was going to say. What I was thinking of Walter is gonna mix up the two, so correct me if I'm wrong. But there's the Sherlock Holmes line in I don't think in the original series, but in the Benedict Cumberbatch one, Martin Freeman one, that's on the BBC more recently.
Yeah,
where somebody calls him a psychopath, and he says, "I'm not a psychopath. I'm a high functioning sociopath."
Yes. Yeah.
And do I have those reversed, or is that right?
No, I think that's from the Cumberbatch one.
Okay, but with the idea being like the idea of a sociopath isn't necessarily that you're bad or evil, but like literally like just don't understand sort of morality.
Yeah, you can't empathize.
And can't empathize. And that was Walter. Like there's no emotion to him in regards to anyone else. And it's even with his wife, it doesn't seem like it's him actively trying to be mean. It's like he literally doesn't understand how anyone else could feel or how anything else affects anybody else, which the voiceover hit at the beginning. You know, his one concern in life is Walter Bedecker. I still really would love to know how Ethel, who seems perfectly nice, ended up with him.
Yeah.
Like even him taking the time to date someone or propose seems very out of character.
Yeah.
Like,
for someone so
what happened
self-centered.
to Walter.
But I have two quick points, then we can kind of move toward a break. But my Twilight Zone theme that I noticed again right off the bat is once again, he wasn't terribly surprised that a big fat guy just appeared in his bedroom out of the complete blue. He's like, how did you get in here? But he's not like, what the fuck is happening? Like I am on my sick bed, and the devil literally just appears in Walter's room for the first time to make him this offer. And once again, there was I feel like a lack of reaction from the Twilight Zone actors of that this guy just appeared in the room once again.
And you're totally right, except I will say this is one of those things where the context matters. Like having just been watching through these other Twilight Zones, I was like, wow, compared to the other people, he actually at least reacted somewhat. Like I remember some of the earlier ones where he actually got in. He's sort of shocked at the start. He gets up and checks the window. And I'm thinking back to one for the Angels where Death appears in Edwin, whatever his character's name was, apartment. And Ed is like completely like, oh, this guy's here. Okay, that's fine. And like, no reaction. So relative to that, I was like, at least this guy noticed this is weird, then immediately accepts it. Like, okay, well, I guess he's here. You want to make a bargain? Let's talk about it.
Maybe Rod maybe one of the viewers sent him a strongly worded letter in the first one.
Maybe somebody posted a tweet about it 60 years later, and Rod Serling traveled back in time and fixed it.
He got crushed on the message boards. The other thing that kind of struck me through this episode, I sort of thought that the music was inappropriate. I thought it was kind of annoyingly wacky throughout this episode. And if you think about it, this was a pretty dark episode. It had the devil, his wife dies, falls to her death. Essentially, he commits suicide at the end. Like it was a dark episode, and the music was like doo 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 doo. It was like wacky music, and I was like, why? I feel like this does not connect with what the hell is going on with this episode.
My speculation on that would be that it goes back to making him an unlikable character in the first place. Like, because this is so dark, but I don't think the message that we're meant to take is, oh, it's all doom and gloom. It's actually kind of like a little bit more uplifting about like, do something productive with the time you have. Don't like wish for unlimited years or blah, blah, blah. And I wonder if the music was just another way to try to make it less dark and depressing. Because honestly, like I was kind of happy when he died at the end because he was a bad guy and annoying anyway. And kind of like Death in the one for the Angels pitch, who turned out to be quite a good guy. I don't want to say the devil here was a good guy necessarily, but he wasn't bad. He was very straightforward with him. This wasn't one of those things where, I think of a lot of the Simpsons episodes, many of which are probably riffs on Twilight Zone episodes, where, someone wishes for something and they get it, but like an ironic version of it.
The monkey's paw.
The monkey's paw one. And in this case, like, he gets exactly what the devil promised him, and his doom in the end has nothing to do with what the devil did, other than maybe the devil knowing with his character, Walter's going to send himself down some sort of dark path and end up needing the escape clause anyway. But the devil was very straightforward about everything with him, and even upfront about when he's like, wait, you're the devil. He's like, yes, I am. Like, he wasn't trying to pretend to be something else.
Yeah, he originally gives Walter like a fake name, and he's like, you're the devil. He's like, yeah, but you can call me Ted or whatever his name was at that point.
Cadwallader's my name, at least the name I'm using this month. I was curious if there was any like symbolism or anything to that, and I looked up the name trying to see what it meant, and the only thing I could find related to that was a king of Wales in the 600s during a couple of devastating plagues. But then it turns out he's also some sort of like mythical redeemer, or like in myth, because this was 1300 years ago, kind of like a King Arthur is viewed as like a positive figure. So it might just have been a random pick, but I'm kind of surprised when he said it. It's an odd enough name. I'm like, that's got to mean something.
Yeah,
and maybe it does, and I just didn't find it in my 2 minutes of Wikipedia research.
But you're also right. I made a note of this too, that the devil was I was rooting for the devil. The devil was the more likable character by far in this whole thing.
Well, and he pulls out the document, and like I was just thinking, I'm always one who like reads through every detail of the legal documents, because just to make sure there's no weird thing in there.
Oh, you're like the opposite of all my clients.
Well, like I guess they hope that you're reading it for them.
Yeah.
But like Walter doesn't even look through it at all. He like, just, where do I sign? And it's like a multi-page document. Where do I sign? And then after the devil's gone, he like kind of flips through it like, yeah, it looks like everything's in order. Like, wouldn't you check if everything's in order before you sign your soul to the devil?
And what do you mean in order? How many of these soul contracts have you seen before? I would be poring over that. And there's a funny
He sends it to his lawyers. Lawyers like, yeah, this is a standard soul for immortality contract. Nothing weird in here.
Yeah, as a director and then and a filmmaker, I was curious about your take on this. So there's a moment after Walter signs it, and I guess the devil just sort of notarizes it, and he stamps it. And when he pulls the stamp up, the paper sticks to it, and the actor, there's kind of like a look on the actor's face, like, "Oops, that wasn't supposed to happen." And he kind of pulls it off and hands it to Walter. And I'm like, I bet that wasn't supposed to happen. I bet that was a happy little accident that kind of gave the devil a little bit of humanity to him. That
was my guess as well. And I honestly was thinking, because it's a 2-shot of both of them. And there's a significant amount of conversation that has there. And there's also this practical effect that, like, while they're in the shot, the pen appears in the devil's hand. Yeah. And then he gives it to Walter. Walter signs it. And then the devil magically appears with this, like, smoking stamp where you sort of see him, like, hold his hand off screen. Someone hands him the stamp and they pump out some smoke and then puts it. So it was kind of, there were a couple of practical shots in the effect practical effects in the shot that weren't super complicated, but I was kind of wondering if, like, yeah, that wasn't really supposed to happen, but like, this was a complicated enough shot. We kind of like the joke. Let's not even bother reshooting it.
Yeah.
Or they got like 40 takes trying to get the stamp to stick
and it
on
wouldn't
it, and finally it did.
So do you have any other thoughts, or should we head to a break?
Let's take a quick break and then we can come back and keep talking about escape clause.
Sounds good.
Okay, and we're back from the break. So, Mike, as we wrap up discussion of this episode, there was one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit that was kind of different than the earlier episodes we've seen. One of my, I don't want to say complaints, because I've enjoyed a lot of the episodes, but one of the things where I thought they often struggled with was the pacing. A lot of times I felt like the audience kind of got ahead of the characters and the episodes felt stretched. We've talked about this in a few of them where it's like, okay, we get what's going on. They're like, well, we still got to fill 5 more minutes of pretending we don't know what's going on. I don't know if this is just that they were kind of seeing that in some of the earlier episodes and responding to it, or it just the nature of this story happened to lend itself to you. But I actually thought this episode did a good job of keeping itself going, particularly in the beginning. Like, we established he's a hypochondriac in that first scene, and then we don't linger a whole lot on that. The devil appears pretty quick. And as they started talking, he said he wants to do a bargain. I'm like, oh, he's going to be a devil. Is that going to be a surprise? Like, nope, I'm the devil and I want your soul. And they signed their deal, negotiate the terms on that pretty quickly. And then we go to commercial break kind of right after that. We're about halfway through the episode. And I was wondering like, okay, what's going to happen in the second half? Because I feel like in some of the earlier episodes, they would have kind of saved that reveal for a little bit later. And we come back and we get right into he's jumping in front of the subway and he's doing this insurance scam. And then he tries to drink the ammonia. Then they go up on the roof and his wife falls. And then he says, hey, maybe I can get into the electric chair. And so I felt plot-wise, they actually kept this one moving very well. And even though it was not one of my favorite episodes for some of the reasons we've already talked about, I thought it did a better job with the pacing, kind of keeping it going. And there was never a moment where I felt like I was waiting for the show to catch up to me.
That's a really great point. Yeah, there was a lot going on in this episode, if you think about it. I mean, he went from a hypochondriac to the chair to in the
always do.
Yeah, in the course of a 22-minute episode. That's a really good point. I definitely wasn't bored, unlike his boring insurance adjuster at any point during this episode.
Yeah, his scheme was stupid and kind of the least interesting thing they could have done with it, but they kept moving through it. And I'll be curious to see kind of how we go in upcoming episodes, if that's something that Serling and his team were getting better at as they went, because that was really the biggest struggle in some of the early episodes. I thought was they had a really good, I think one of the episodes we said this was a really good 10-minute film, like stretched to 22, and this I don't know if I would say it was really good, but it didn't feel stretched. It felt like the length of it, 24, 25 minutes was about right for the story they were going to tell. And that also made it more interesting for me when I was doing my usual try to predict what's going on as it went, because every time I was like, okay, I think I see where this was going. Like they were right there with me. And like the next line would be like, oh, actually I'm the devil and I want your soul. And I mean, not every time was that line, but I would figure out something like that. And then it would be like, okay, this is where we're going. And so it kind of kept me guessing, because from the Twilight Zone episodes we had seen, I sort of expected a fairly limited amount of plot. And so I was kind of guessing like, okay, well the plot will go to here, and they would get there and there's still a ton of episode left in this case. So then it had to keep spinning somewhere else. So I thought that was something that, for as much as we have kind of bashed this episode overall, I think rightly, that was something I feel like they did a nice job with, and that marked kind of a step forward relative to the previous 5 episodes we had seen.
I'm glad you said that, because that reminds me of something, and something that I think you and I both struggled with a little bit is like, we have the context of 60 years of content from when this came out, and when like this might have been a super revolutionary idea. Like we are framing it in the context of having seen Groundhog Day and having seen Unbreakable, but like those are old ideas for us. I mean, Groundhog Day is what, 20 years old at this point, 30 years old almost. And even Unbreakable is over 10, 15 years old. And so we have these old movies to us that are way beyond what Serling was doing in 1959. And then I'm glad you brought us back to this a little bit too, because something you said there just triggered another thought in me. I think everyone, and before I started watching this series, I shouldn't say everyone, but I think a lot of people see the Twilight Zone as a very sci-fi series. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen that much sci-fi. I feel like we've seen a lot of religion. I guess you could still qualify this, and some people would qualify religion in general as science fiction, but you could still probably couch a lot of this.
You just made yourself some powerful enemies, Mr. Brott.
So I'm not an altar boy. I'm fine. I think you could probably couch this still as science fiction, but there's a lot more spiritual, religious context, because really, Where Is Everybody is kind of the only one that we've seen so far that's really science fiction. Of course, this is all fantasy sort of fiction, but like that, I feel like is the biggest sticking point. Well, I guess the last week's episode, the going back through time. But
I think you're right. That's a really good point. And you'd been watching the Twilight Zone more recently than I had. And one of the objectives of this podcast series overall, not just with the Twilight Zone, but with our larger theme of kind of looking back at shows that had been rebooted or rethought and kind of what their relevance is I think the cultural mindset about what the Twilight Zone is actually pretty different from at least the episodes we've seen thus far.
Yes.
You hit the nail on the head. Like, I think Twilight Zone, I think science fiction, I think aliens.
Right.
And I know there will be some episodes like that.
Right.
But it's the ones we've seen thus far are very, very grounded in kind of big ideas and points that I feel like Serling wants to make about life and about the human condition. And
Yes.
a lot of the best science fiction is absolutely about that. So I'm not saying that's distinct from science fiction, but he's often doing those in very sort of grounded, realistic ways. And I realize it's a little strange to say realistic when we've seen appearances from Death and from the Devil and Guy traveling back in time. But
no,
you're right. They're not science fiction. They're not alien-y. They're very like one weird thing happens, and what does that reveal about character and the human condition?
Yeah.
And that's been really surprising and interesting to me looking back at these early episodes, because it is not, if you would have asked me what the Twilight Zone is, I think even if you look at some of our first couple episodes, and I guess I'm learning, where I make like the guess for what the episode's going to be about, I tend to veer science fiction-y because that's was in my head as what the Twilight Zone is. So that's a really good point.
And to tease you guys a little bit, we are going, when we're done, whether we make it all the way through this series or whenever we decide to stop, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on whether it's worth watching the Twilight Zone in 2019, or it'll probably be 2020, maybe 2021 when we're actually done.
I like that after we've done like all these episodes and people have listened to that and I assume watch the episodes along with it, then we get to the
Was
end.
it worth it?
No, it actually wasn't. You probably shouldn't have spent any time doing this.
What a colossal waste of time that was. Okay, any other thoughts about the episode itself, Mark, before we move on to our sweat level?
No major thoughts about the episode. I want to throw out just one other filmmaking thing, because I always do try to keep an eye on those. The scene where he is getting sentenced. So he's confessed to killing his wife, even though he really didn't, because he's trying to get the electric chair. And he's before the judge, and it's this great thing you see in a lot of kind of this era of filmmaking where they're kind of, particularly with these TV shows where they're cranking them out quick and trying to do them on the cheap. And it's not, you don't see the courtroom, you don't see any extras. It's like this tight shot of a guy in a judge robe, like sitting at a desk with Walter and his lawyer facing him, and they don't even cut it when Walter has to talk. They don't even cut around to like his face, because then you'd have to see like people behind him and stuff like that. We just like stay in the. I'm like, this looks like they found just like an empty room, put a desk in front of a wall, threw a judge at it, like, we got a courtroom, just frame it really tight.
That's funny you say that, because I noticed that. I didn't know why I noticed that felt weird, but I did notice watching it that felt weird. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and I think generally Twilight Zone has done a pretty good job. Most of the episodes we've seen to this point, not all of them, but most of them take place in a very limited number of locations, and they kind of dress those locations pretty well and make those look good, but then you don't get a whole lot else. And this one, actually, we see a few more different locations, right? We have the subway, we have Walter's bedroom, we have their living room, we have the bathroom, we have the roof, we have the judges, the courtroom, we have the scene where he meets with the lawyer, we have the prison. So I get they're finding ways to use all these, and the jail room set, I assume, was just part of their backlot that they have for all of their jail things. But the one thing with the judge was clearly like, I bet they had a courtroom set and it was like in use by another show that day, and they're like, just throw a desk around here, and it's framed really awkwardly relative to like how everything else in the show is shot.
Okay, so moving on to our sweat rankings, Mark, and this is a scale of 1 to 10 of our sweat rankings. Do you want to lead us in? How sweaty was this episode?
I would say this episode was not very sweaty at all. I'm gonna give it maybe like a 2. The only time I really saw noticeable sweat was on the Devil when he was about to sort of close the deal, and you see him kind of like sweating, like, is he gonna take it or not? Walter himself, I thought, was never very sweaty. So I'm going to rank it pretty low.
I thought this was, and it's funny you mentioned that devil, because I took a note of this too, because the devil at one point says, "Oh, it's super hot in here," and he's barely sweating, and he's a big fat guy,
and also he's supposedly from hell.
Right? Yeah, but although if you,
it's hotter than hell in here.
Dante's hell is cold, so let's all show how smart we are.
I didn't know that, so I'm just gonna latch onto your smartness and say okay.
I would say 2 at the most. I was even thinking maybe a 1. So
I'm reserving.
Do we need another level of sweat? Do we need to make this
for an episode where I don't see anyone sweat at all? I don't know if we'll ever see that.
Okay.
So this is basically,
2.
I think, the minimal level of sweat you could get while still having some sweat.
Okay. Okay, that's fair too. And I should have written this down, because there was someone maybe it was like I think like his guard in the prison had like some sweat on his upper lip for no reason.
Well, he was carrying that plate of food into the cell, and it was a pretty heavy plate of food.
I think that's what it was, and I noticed that. But okay, so let's call it a 2.
Did you notice the guard at the guard gets the last line before Serling's end voiceover, which probably read that because his voiceover is just fantastic.
Yeah,
there's a saying: every man is put on earth condemned to die. Time and method of execution unknown. Perhaps this is as it should be. Case in point: Walter Bedecker, lately deceased, a little man with such a yen to live, beaten by the devil, by his own boredom, and by the scheme of things in this, the Twilight Zone. So good. But the last character line before that is the cop says, "Poor devil." And I'm like, oh, that's so cute. Like having him say devil when you made the deal with the devil and blah, blah. Anyway.
I didn't even catch that. Okay, so should we move on to our modern applicability of this episode, Mark?
Yeah, I think the themes have a lot to talk about as much as we hated Walter himself.
Yes.
Maybe that has modern applicability too. I still hate people, so.
Before we even get into that, this is tangentially related. You guys vaccinate your fucking kids. Because as in the hypochondriac thing, vaccinate your fucking kids. Please take them out right now if they're not vaccinated and go vaccinate them. So I was just thinking about that in the hypochondriac Walter bullshit.
Well, man, I don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole, but that I'm with you on that. And what's interesting is some people I know on Facebook who are super anti-vaxxers, they'll put these posts like, oh, you got to see this like documentary about all this stuff. And like, I know who made that documentary, and it's this company that does, there's this company that basically churns out these quote unquote documentary. No, they're aimed at like this very right-wing audience, like, and the company themselves and the filmmakers don't actually believe any of it, but it's a really good business model. They're like, we'll crank these things out. We make them on the cheap. We just reinforce what these people already want to believe and want to hear. And then we'll make a ton of money off it. And then we'll just crank out the next one. And so yes, vaccinate your kids. And also everybody, like, look at the sources of your media and think about where it's coming from, and is this a reliable source, and do a little homework on your own.
And to that company that's doing that doing that, check your moral compass at some point, because like, you're probably doing more harm than good. Yes, you're making money.
Well, you definitely are, but like how many, that I feel like that could apply. I agree with you, but it's like that applies to so many things where it's like, yes, you're doing harm just for the money, and it. Like I guess I'd kind of rather have them doing that than like a company that's dumping toxic waste in the lake because it's cheaper, They're like, we're doing both.
Okay, great.
Toxic waste disposal and right-wing documentaries incorporated. I had a former student who worked not at the company that made that one, but at another company that's there's a whole market for this. That was working at another one of these for a little while and quit with kind of no other job or anything lined up, but just like, it was like, as far as what I'm going to get out of like learning the filmmaking, the 6 months I spent here kind of seeing the logistic side was helpful, but it's just like, you feel so bad going into work on that every day. I can't keep doing it.
Good for that student. So as far as my modern applicability goes, I'm going to get a little personal on this one. We had a very, personally had a very rough month of November. There were a lot of surgeries in mine and Kelsey's families that were serious, and so we're seeing like kind of the mortality of parents and grandparents, that they're okay now and they're recovering, but like they are not getting any younger. We're not getting any younger. And I think the older I get, obviously it's it's natural to fear death. I think it's natural to fear death. I don't care how many poets write that embrace it with a kiss or whatever. But, and the more I've been on this planet, the more I wonder if that fear is me wondering if I just haven't left enough of a stamp on the world, or if it's just a fear of, because I'm an atheist. Like I don't believe that
your legacy is going to be the Deja Reviewed podcast.
Oh no! Don't say that, you monster. Okay, I hate you worse than Walter Bedecker now. Or if it's just fear of the great beyond, because I'm an atheist. I don't believe in an afterlife. But and like I think it's hard to wrap your mind around the fact that you just someday won't exist, and you won't remember that you don't exist because you just don't exist anymore. And like, I think I mentioned this in one of our prior podcasts, but that like, that legacy or that thing, maybe it was One for the Angels, that legacy or that thing that you want to leave behind, time just gets shorter and shorter. And like, so this yearning for immortality, whether it be physical immortality or whether it be the immortality of coming up with a vaccine or curing cancer or doing something or making a Deja Reviewed podcast. Like I get it. I get where this monstrous character was coming from. I don't condone it, but that was kind of my takeaway from it.
Yeah. That's sort of the most human of emotions or worries. I mean, whether you believe in an afterlife or a God or religion or not, I think there's a reason that most religions, one of their major tenets is like figuring out what happens after you die. Like that's a big question for humanity. That we want to know, and it's because we're scared of, well, what if there is nothing? Or what if there is something and it's terrible, and you go down to hell with whatever the guy's name was, Cadwallader or something, and you have to meet Walter because he's down there now. That would be the real hell. It's a huge thing, and I'm there with you in the just fear of the unknown and what happens there, and particularly as you get older and realize you don't have as many years left as you did when you were younger. To just tie this back to this episode for 1 second, one of the things that was kind of the most bizarre to me is Walter gets this sort of physical immortality and doesn't try to do anything with it to bring himself a more sort of valuable level of immortality. Like if you really could live forever, find some like big question that the world needs solved, and you could spend forever working on it and figure it out. And I know Walter's selfish and self-centered, and so wouldn't necessarily want to do it for the good of the world, but I could see him like use your time to do that so that you are remembered as like a hero. That could be self-serving and still do good for other people. And he again just thinks so small. Like, I'm going to jump in front of a bus and get $1,000. Like,
yeah. I don't know why I just thought of this, but there was a very funny line from the devil at the beginning when Walter's like, well, what about my appearance? And the devil's like, well, I can't really do anything about that. He's like, you're not going to look any older, but your face is your face. Sorry, I just thought about that.
Yeah, he says like, you'll stay the way you look more or less. And I was like, is that where this is going to go? Like he gets like one really bizarre,
like a horn
change to his
look.
Like, well, you look mostly how you used to look.
Yeah. But in going back to that, you guys, that you folks that are religious, I kind of envy you a little bit of having that sort of peace of mind, but also bear in mind that a lot of religions, like Mark was just pointing out, you weren't pointing this out. I won't put these words in your mouth, but it made me think of what you were saying. Like, yes, this fear of the unknown is what a lot of these religions are specifically preying on. For the Catholic Church going back in the day would make you pay to get out of going to that hell place. So just use some critical thinking when you're going and putting that $20 into the collection jar, into that tax-free organization every week that is the biggest organized crime syndicate in the history of modern civilization, and even in modern.
You can address your hate mail on Twitter to at Michael Brott.
Oh yes, we should start a podcast on religion and then one on politics.
But something you said about the envy there, like one thing that I do, I have a lot of I don't know if the right word is respect or sort of admiration for, is people who can kind of like take something on faith without like the proof of it, and to really true, I think a lot of people who subscribe to some religion with an afterlife will still, even like at the end, they're like, man, I hope I'm right. And I really admire people who can actually we don't know if they're right or wrong, but who really can firmly believe like, no, this is the truth, and I will have an afterlife, and kind of be comfortable with that.
I hope I picked the correct one of all of these religions that gave me the right afterlife.
Well, if you're gonna pick based on afterlife, you could go a little religion shopping and see which one
it looks the best.
Yeah, which has the most appealing afterlife to you. Some of the ones where you get reincarnated, but you don't really have control over what you're reincarnated at. Those are I think a little scary, because I'm like, well, I'd kind of like to still be alive in some form, but what if I come back as like a bug and just get squashed on somebody's window? I don't know.
I hope that there is an episode at some point of Twilight Zone where our consciousness just gets uploaded into a computer and we can still think our thoughts and do our things without having to worry about our bodies breaking down.
Well, we talked a few episodes ago, and then earlier this episode, about the early retirement movement. And I know something else that came up in that conversation was just the idea that people are living longer, and whether we as a society are financially, structurally, ethically, everything kind of prepared for that. There is so much research and work going on right now on basically kind of stopping the physical deterioration that comes with aging. And so much of that research is, you have to think driven by like, yes, everyone's scared of dying. If we could, whether you're religious or not, if we can find a way to just stop you from getting older and you stay living a healthy life for kind of as long as you want, as was promised to Walter, that most people would choose to take that. I remember, what's the Ray Kurzweil, the futurist. I was at a talk by him at one point, and he was basically saying, if you can make it to this was his hypothesis, and he's had some success in sort of predicting the rates of technological advancement and stuff, although he's, I think, also pretty open about it's really hard to predict how fast some things will move. But basically said, if you can make it to 2050, he thinks at that point we will be able to sort of keep you alive and functional indefinitely, which I thought was interesting.
I'm going to be so close.
You got a decent shot at making it to 2050.
There's a really good book by Drew McGarry called The Postmortal. If I remember, I'll link it in the show notes, but it's just Google it, called The Postmortal.
You're not going to remember.
Drew McGarry. Yeah. It's a book about how they've cured. Now, they haven't cured cancer. They haven't cured you getting hit by a bus. They didn't make you immortal, but they cured aging. So like if you're 25 years old, they give you this surgery or whatever it is, and you just stay at 25 years old, and you'll never die of old age. Like you'll die of other things, but you'll never die of old age. Oh, actually, now that I'm saying this is a great, I wish I'd have brought this up earlier. So they're realizing all these things that they have to do. Like you, Mark, you and I have mentioned a couple times about people not retire. Like, how do you retire when you're kind of immortal? Things like marriage, they're like, they enter into like, let's say 35-year marriage contracts. And at the end of that contract, you can be like, do you want to re-up and go another 35 years, or you want to just be done with this? Because like we might live 500 years. Like, I don't think that I could stand the same person, or I don't think I could stand myself for 500 years.
I know none of us can.
It's going to take 500 years to get through all of this Twilight Zone. But so you'll find out
like one episode every 4 years or something. It's like the slowest loading podcast ever. All right, tune in 2023 for our next episode.
But it's a short read. It's a great read. It might be Drew's first book. I think he was a sports blogger, right? I think he was like a Deadspin or a Kissing Susie Colbert guy. I forget what. Anyhow, I should have looked all this up. But that reminded me of the Postmortal, and it's definitely worth a read if you're into sci-fi. And how it kind of, I know a lot of people have their problems with World War Z, the book and the movie, but I really did appreciate that kind of different take on it, like a look at like, how does this affect world governments? Like Korea just decided to just yank out people's teeth, everyone's teeth, just in case they turned. Like, how would this actually politically and kind of socioeconomically affect? How would a zombie outbreak affect those things? I thought that was an interesting book. And whatever, the movie was whatever, but the Postmortal is a nice, short, quick read. I would strongly recommend it. Get it for someone you love. You're welcome, Drew, for that plug.
Yeah, see if you can get him to advertise on the show. Yeah, that's such an interesting thing, like how it would affect government, society, everything else. And we talked a little bit about this on One for the Angels, with you had the pretty astute idea of it being a metaphor for the old guy needs to die and make room for the kid, where he has sort of the explicit choice of either he dies or the young girl dies. Yeah. You know what happens if even if we're not immortal, but let's just say the human lifespan suddenly increased to, we don't even have to be extreme and say like 500 years. Like, what if they increase it to like 110, 120, and people are still like very high functioning bodies, productive, still functioning minds, well into your 90s as the norm. Like, okay, well, we already have problems with finding enough jobs for everybody as new people are aging into the workforce as it is now. What happens when suddenly nobody retires for 40 years because we're all going to live that much longer?
We have to make all the jobs super dangerous. So people, like, every job has to be super dangerous. So
if it's something that's not inherently dangerous, they like just add a danger factor to it. So like, okay, so your job is what? Lawyer? Okay, so you're going to keep doing your normal job except
juggle these knives.
Except every day we're going to just release some poisonous snakes into the law building, and the first 3 people they bite are dead. Like,
yeah. Speaking of lawyers, just along this modern applicability, for those of you who don't know that I am a lawyer, I really felt for his lawyer at the end of this episode, who's like, he's sitting down with him in like the wherever they meet in the jail to talk about strategy, and he's like, Walter, he's like, he's like, I think I can just get you, like, basically, I think you can get, why are you admitting to all this? Like, shut up, listen to what I'm telling you and shut up. And if I could tell a handful of my clients, just listen to what I'm telling you, shut your mouth, I would be a lot happier of a lawyer. So not trying to open a theater.
I had a legal question for you. Because
great, this is the perfect podcast for it.
Right, send all your legal questions on Twitter. Yeah. But so I was wondering, like, he wanted to get the death penalty, like that was his aim, right?
Yeah.
And this is my assumption, not as a lawyer, and this is what I wanted to ask you, like, why does he have a lawyer who's fighting against that? Couldn't he just say, like, I don't want to contest the charges, I don't want to argue against it, like, and if that's the client's wishes, wouldn't the lawyer kind of it was weird, like, that, the lawyer's like, I put you on the stand, and then suddenly you don't want to say anything. Like, I don't think those are all the lawyer's choices. Doesn't the lawyer kind of have to do what he wants? Or
he does, but I don't think so. Of course, our American legal system is based on the fact that you're entitled to a strong and firm defense. So, I got the impression that the lawyer was a little bit bamboozled by Walter at the end, because I don't think Walter at any point actually told the lawyer, I want the chair, until he actually got I think Walter just figured he would help the lawyer lose, and apparently the lawyer was doing a good enough job. And also, I shouldn't say that the lawyer did that great of a job, because he still got a conviction. It's just that the sentencing hearing, which is what I assume that we were at when he got the life in jail instead of the chair, I don't know. Like, we didn't see or hear anything of that. So
I feel like the lawyer must have done something right. Like, look, when your client confesses to the crime, refuses to give any explanation for why he did it, and like, as the lawyer said, basically like helps the opponent's case, and you still manage to not get him the death penalty when he apparently killed his wife in cold blood, as far as the case seemed to be, and admitted to it. And
yeah, did New York even have the death penalty at this? Anyhow, I would also point out that like it's interesting now that I forget what our life sentence is, but there's actually a year limit on life sentences now. They just gave him a life sentence, and the prison guard is like, yeah, what's life? 40, 45 years, maybe even shorter than that. Like there was no, like in theory, if Walter got convicted of a life sentence now, he could outlive it. He could outlive the life sentence. I forget how long
there's actually some time limit on it.
Yeah.
So is that
at
why?
Least
Why sometimes
I'm not a criminal lawyer. And this is not legal advice, just so don't come at me. So I think that is
that you are not a lawyer who does criminal law, or you are not a criminal / I am a lawyer?
You don't need a criminal lawyer. You need a criminal lawyer. One of my favorite lines from Breaking Bad. But yeah, my understanding, at least in, I assume, certain states, that there is a year limit on what. That's why when someone gets 6 life sentences, they're like, oh, well, that's whatever, 180 years. Well, I'm sure it's more than that.
But but also maybe why they'll do consecutive life sentences.
Right,
so
exactly.
Even if you live 30 years, you still got.
You're going to die in jail.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Well, that's another one of those things, going back to what we were just talking about, that if suddenly everyone's living a lot longer,
it would have to change.
Starts to have a big effect.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'll get a life sentence when I'm 20, and I'll still come out at 60 and got another 60 years of life in me.
Yep. Okay, so Mark, anything else on the modern applicability, or should we rate this episode?
No, this was just a pretty depressing episode all around.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't like Walter. It's about the fact that everybody has to die, which I would prefer just not to think about on a regular basis.
Walter's a total piece of shit.
Yeah, that was kind of, like, honestly, the kind of redeeming thing was, like, you know, it took me away from focusing on, like, the downside of mortality, because I'm like, yeah, let's kill Walter. That guy's a dick.
Yeah.
So
I think the only redeeming part of this episode was that the guy who played the devil was super charming. I really liked the Twilight Zone take on. We saw Mr. Death in One for the Angels being really charming. Like you mentioned, Fate in Mr. Denton on Doomsday was. I mean, he didn't really say a lot, but he was not that scary of a guy. He was a little mysterious. I kind of like the Twilight Zone's take. And going forward, there's some other things about mortality that I'm just now thinking of in my head that are trying to maybe make it seem a little less frightening, and that may be Serling's intent. And I guess it had the twist at the end that he got life in jail and all that stuff instead of the chair was, I guess, I thought it was a little bit predictable, but it was a little bit of an interesting twist at the end of it.
You knew as soon as the devil brought up the escape clause, I mean, because that's the title of the episode, but just because that was like the only specific clause they talked about, you're like, okay, really the question for the second half of the episode is just what's going to happen that's going to make Walter decide I want to die.
Well, there was probably the only clause in that 2-page contract.
It said it was clause 93, so there were a lot of clauses.
That was some small
text. Or they just skipped some numbers. One last thing I want to throw out, I guess almost like a humorous or weird take on the religious aspect, is the interesting thing to me is if I'm thinking logically, which I get Walter often was not, he did not seem to think many of his plans through very well. If the devil comes to me and, sort of offers like, well, I'll give you this for your soul,
but you have to beat me in this fiddle contest.
Well, but the fact that the devil shows up is essentially proof that there is some sort of like higher power and an afterlife. Oh, yeah. Like when the devil shows up, that's the moment you should be like, no, I don't want to sell my soul, because your existence actually is pretty good evidence that there is some afterlife with like a heaven and a hell, and I would rather be in heaven.
Yeah, but do you think at that point in his life, because Walter's probably in his 50s,
right? No, Walter's dumb. But I'm saying that's the interesting thing to me when like the idea of sort of abstractedly like, would you sell your soul for blah 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 blah, is different than the devil actually appearing changes all your calculus, because then you actually know there are higher powers and there theoretically is some sort of afterlife, and would change like what you would be willing to give up your soul for. Like if you mentioned you're an atheist, and if somebody said like, would you give your soul for this? You're like, sure, I don't.
Hell yeah.
You know?
Gum? What do you got?
But
Gum?
if the devil actually shows up and you're like, wait, there actually is a devil, that's going to change what you would be willing to give your soul for.
So, but that's interesting though, because then if let's say that Walter actually put that together, Walter's been such a piece of shit through his whole life. If he knows there's an afterlife, well, seriously, he probably knows that he's damned to hell anyhow. So selling your soul to the devil is like, even if this doesn't work, like he's going to
get it anyway. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to go to hell anyhow. So maybe he did think it through, and that's why he so quickly jumped on that contract, because he knew his soul was worthless.
I would like to see a whole episode that just is the person negotiating with the devil and working through all of this. Like that's the entire thing.
Can we address subclause 15?
Okay, about this eternal damnation, I need a little more info on that. Like, can I get a trade-in for some of my previous damnation?
Who's down there? So we ranked these on a scale of 1 to 5.
Right.
What did you think, Mark? What number rating? And I guess we do half. We should just go to 10 at this point, but we do half.
No, we're going to stay consistent. Go to half.
Okay.
I also maintain the sweat scale can also go in half, so that we have a more detailed sweat scale. I'm going to say like maybe a 1.5. I really as I mentioned, the episode's never boring, but I never cared about anybody. And I thought the questions it raised, it handled in a really uninteresting way. So this is, of the ones we've watched, this is definitely my least favorite. I'm not going to give it a straight up 1, because I want to leave room for there to be worse things. And like I said, this one at least had better pacing. If this had been all the problems it had plus as slow as some of the earlier ones, it'd be a 1, but I'll give it a 1.5.
Okay, that's fair. I was gonna say 2, so I'm fine with 1.5, because
I can average it to 1 3/4 and really start getting detailed.
the only reason I was gonna give it a 2 is because I did think that the devil was kind of charming, and and like you said, it didn't. I definitely wasn't bored by it. I just didn't particularly care for it.
We could have used more of the devil. Like, think of how much death is in One for the Angels, or even like the fate in Mr. Denton and Doomsday is kind of, he doesn't have a lot to say, but he's kind of always around. And we could have used the devil in more of this episode, because Walter's just like
sucked.
Yeah, he's like the anti-hero, but not like the current anti-hero where you sort of like, he's a bad guy, but you're kind of rooting for him anyway. This is like, no, he's a bad guy and we don't want him to succeed.
No, yeah, he was the worst. Okay, so next week's episode, ready? Mark, are you ready to guess along or guess what the next episode is going to be about?
I am. We should be keeping track of these. I think so far out of all the episodes, there's one where I was sort of close, which was the 16 millimeter shrine.
You basically nailed the 16 millimeter shrine.
Well, all the other ones I've been way off on. So
no, that's all right.
That was my one victory, but we'll see what I can do with this one.
So next week's episode, and remember, you guys, you can watch along on Netflix with us if you want to. It's on US Netflix. It's season 1, episode 7, and it's entitled The Lonely. The Lonely.
Not The Lonely something, just The Lonely?
The Lonely Island. This is actually Andy Samberg's first episode.
He's like negative 15 years old.
The Lonely. Not only The Lonely, just The Lonely.
Oh boy, man, that could be anything.
I don't even remember what this one's about.
I'm gonna go super literal and say it's about a group of lonely people who somehow get brought together, and the Twilight Zone-y twist is that there's some way that they can have companionship or find a friend, but they have to give something up to do it.
Ooh, another monkey's paw situation. I like it.
Yeah, I probably just because I have this episode in the bargain with the devil still in my head. But I have The Lonely is so vague. That could be anything. That's what I'm going with.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you for listening. This was Deja Reviewed. Like we mentioned, next week's episode is episode 7 of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, titled The Lonely. Feel free to leave us a rating and a comment wherever you're listening to us. And you can find us at dejareviewed.com. You can send us messages and stuff there. I hope you tune in next week. Thank you.
Deja Review.